I'm Jaden Robinson, and this is the Movie Police. Just re-released on Blu-ray is the Gremlins movies. Now, I thought the first Gremlins film was a perfectly fun Christmas movie. However, the second one was a complete mess. I don't know what's fun about watching all these different little critters that make absolutely no sense wander around the world causing havoc. I don't understand how it appeals to anybody. Frankly, I'd rather spend 2 hours having root canal done. I mean, who are the right man? No.
Robinson.
No, please, no!
Unless you've been living under a rock for however long you've been alive, you'll know that Gremlins is one of the most iconic movies of the 1980s. It follows a young man called Billy Peltzer as he gets an odd creature called a Mogwai as a Christmas gift, and strange events ensue as he finds out the rules of the Mogwai. Don't get them wet, don't expose them to bright lights, and don't let them eat after midnight. As for what happens if that does happen, they turn into Gremlins, these mischievous, somewhat evil creatures that cause absolute havoc. While it's obviously a silly concept, the film was very grounded in the execution, and it was probably down to the simple plot, likeable characters, and cuteness of Gizmo that the film did so ridiculously well. So naturally, Warner Brothers wanted to do a sequel to the movie pretty much immediately after. But guess who didn't want to do a sequel? The director. Joe Dante is the absolute original G. This guy made his movie and didn't want to do a sequel because he felt that the story was told. These characters' stories were told and there was nothing else to say. Warner Brothers, on the other hand, begged for Joe to join on for a sequel, but he denied again and again. Warner spent the next few years going around to different directors asking who wanted to take on the Gremlin sequel, but all of them felt that Joe was the only person suited for the franchise. So after a very long process of failing to get directors on board, Warner came crawling back to Joe with one of the most ridiculous and notorious offers in Hollywood history. They would allow Joe a practically unlimited budget and complete creative control. If you're out of the loop, complete creative control is something that is very, very rarely allowed in movies, especially those made in the big bad world of Hollywood. So Joe took this opportunity to laugh at the studio. He was going to exploit this offer in the most hilarious way possible. And that's why he made Gremlins 2, The New Batch. Before we get into the story of this movie, I want to point out that this is my absolute favourite movie of all time, and it hasn't always been that way. After graduating university, I decided to stay in York, where I'm studying, so I moved into a house with a few of my friends, one of them being Cole. Now, me and Cole had lost touch for a lot of years, but recently we got back in touch and get along pretty well, and he was out with me one night and said, "Have you seen the Gremlins movies?" And I said that I had some strange recollections that were sort of hazy of me watching the first one as a kid, and I wasn't even aware that there was a second one. So what Cole proceeded to do was show me the first Gremlins film and then show me the Key and Peele sketch. Now, if you know anything about Gremlins 2, you've probably seen this sketch. It's absolutely incredible.
So you mean, like, what if there was like a brainy gremlin?
A brainy gremlin.
You talking about a gremlin with glasses who could talk and sing New York, New York? That's brilliant. It's in the movie done.
Whoa, you said that nothing was final.
That was before I heard the words brainy and gremlin in the same sentence together. It's done. I love it. It's in the movie next.
What about a spider gremlin?
You mean a gremlin with 8 legs and a thorax just catching pretty ladies in a web in an office building? Oh my God, it's in the movie. I love it. Next.
What about a bat gremlin?
You mean a gremlin with leathery wings just flying around, flip-flopping, bust through a wall, make a perfect bat symbol in the wall, get outside, get in some wet concrete, jump up on a building and just dry in place like a gargoyle gremlin? We are cooking with gas now. I love it. It's in the movie next.
Could there be a female gremlin?
Lipstick boobies, bitch, you have me and little gremlin vajayjay. I love it so much that it's not only in the movie, but it's definitely in the movie. There's no backseat.
So naturally, after watching the sketch, my first thing that I said to Cole was, there's absolutely no way any of that is actually in the movie, right? Yeah, it's all in there. And a lot weirder stuff. Honestly, I think they went pretty easy on the movie. The Gremlins aren't even the weirdest part of this film, if you're asking me. So our house has become a bit of a gremlin fest, to be honest. My room is littered with merchandise. Our living room is littered with merchandise. Cole has all of the Mogwai as prop replicas. Mia, who's moving into our house in a few weeks, we showed the movies to, and now she's obsessed with Gremlins as well. It is honestly a phenomenon. Everyone we've shown this franchise to has fallen in love with it. And as I say, I'm sure a lot of you watching this have probably seen the first one, but the second one seems to have been a bit of a cult kind of iconography movie. And so hopefully with this video, should it perform well, I want to introduce more of you to the absolute weird world of Gremlins 2. So without further ado, let's go over it. Okay, the setup has changed slightly because it's a few days later because I needed a bit more time to work on what I wanted to say here, because believe me, I've got a lot to say. Okay, so I think to understand why Gremlins 2 is a fascinating movie, we kind of need to look at the first one, because the first one is not a grounded movie in the slightest. Like, yes, it's grounded in the execution, but the general plot is still wild. You've got this little creature called Gizmo, who is a Mogwai, right? And like I mentioned at the start, you can't get them wet, can't feed them after midnight, and you can't expose them to bright lights or else they become gremlins, okay? So the first movie, you have Billy Peltzer, his girlfriend Kate, and, a few other little side characters like his neighbor, Mr. Futterman, and they all come together to defeat the gremlins, right? Pretty simple, fun, slightly scary Christmas movie, okay? But the first movie, despite its silliness, there are parts in it that are pretty dark, and they do conform to the horror genre. Like, the designs of the gremlins are pretty creepy. Obviously we look at the film now, and with a bit of modern perspective, we can sort of see why it's funny. It's some of the effects are fairly outdated, some of the things are a little bit out there. But ultimately, if we're looking at how it was perceived at the time, yes, people saw the silliness in it, people aren't stupid even then. But, there was this genuine horror aspect to that first movie. And I think what makes the second one so fascinating, and where I want to begin, is that this movie hates the first one with a passion. Okay, so we're taking horror out the window for this second movie, right? I don't care who you are, I don't care how old you are, I don't care when you're watching this movie. Gremlins 2 is not a scary movie in the slightest. It is through and through a comedy from the very start. And I think the best way to explain why this movie is hysterical is to just quickly list off some of the core things about it that are so drastically, crazily different to that first movie. So we still have a lot of the same main characters. We've still got Billy, we've still got Kate, even Mr. Futterman, the neighbor, turns back up in this movie. You've got some overlapping characters, and the main characters from the first one are still very much your main characters in the second one. Their lives are very different. Kate and Billy have moved to New York and are in these dead-end jobs that they kind of want to move out of. They work in what's called the Clamp building, which is owned by this eccentric businessman called Daniel Clamp, right? So far, well, yes, we've got a very funny, obvious Donald Trump parody present. It's still a fairly grounded movie. And I would actually argue, while there's a lot of silly stuff that goes on, the first half of Gremlins 2 plays it pretty safe. I'm not trying to say there isn't some stupid stuff that happens. We still get introduced to some very silly concepts. So, there's this villainous scientist called Dr. Catheter, right? Who's played by Christopher Lee. There's an obvious pun there about one of his previous characters. And, this is like a very weird laboratory where he does experiments on animals, for whatever reason. It's never really explained why he has this fascination. But yeah, so we have aspects like that, which are a little bit silly. In fact, I forgot to mention that his employees, his employees in this facility are two cloned guys called Martin and Lewis. Right? Right, anyway, look. So that's pretty silly, but ultimately the point I'm trying to make is that, the ground layer of this film, and talking about it as, a whole, it's not too out there. It's perfectly followable. But the film, I'd say the film starts to go off the rails when we're introduced to the new Mogwai of this film. So in the first movie, when Gizmo, gets wet and starts to multiply, which is how the gremlins, start to be, it's where the gremlins come from. When Gizmo gets wet, these little balls pop off of him, which grow into Mogwai, and if those Mogwai eat after midnight, they become gremlins, right? Simple, okay? First movie, the Mogwai look very similar to Gizmo. They weren't particularly standout in their designs. I think the only one that was really different was Stripe, who's the leader of the Mogwai in that first film. So for the second movie, Joe Dante wanted all of the Mogwai and their respective gremlins, when they'd eventually become them, to look different. So the gremlins that you have in this movie are Daffy, who I refer to as the cocaine gremlin. He's got these bog eyes, he's totally off his nut. when he gets grabbed or someone picks him up, he does this weird wriggle, which is hysterically funny. Then you've got, and this is fascinating. This is where, like, again, there's more obvious dumb stuff in this movie, but I think there are layers of genius in this film for no apparent reason, right? And one of my favourite deep cuts of this film is that you have George and Lenny, right? And these two Mogwai, eventually Gremlins, are inseparable. They spend every moment together. And, you know, to any notable, you know, to anyone who has a keen eye, you'll look at these two and realise that they are based off the same characters and the same names from Of Mice and Men, right? Which in itself is hysterically funny. But you can take it a step further and realise that George looks the spitting image of Edward G. Robinson. Why? Like, genuinely. It's just brilliant. Because I don't know why that's there, but I love it, right? See, so you have those two, they're fantastic. And then you have Mohawk, who is sort of the reincarnation of Stripe from that first movie, okay? Mohawk, I have to give credit where credit's due, okay? Mohawk goes on to do some crazy stuff in this movie, but just the design of him, like even as a Mogwai, which are meant to be these very cute, cuddly versions. Like I'd say even George, Lenny, and Daffy look pretty cute. Mogwai's fucking creepy, dude. Like genuinely, he's I think his design is just absolutely fantastic. You know, I think that's something they really nailed with this film, and something that I want to make a big point of here, is that making the Mogwai and the Gremlins distinct from each other is one of the best choices they made for this film, unironically. You know, I think even if they decided to play it straight and do a Gremlins 2 that matches the vibe and the eeriness of the first movie, I still think giving personalities and new designs to all the Gremlins is an absolutely fantastic idea. And they nail it. You know, I wouldn't change any of these characters for the world. I think they're fantastic. So, a little bit silly, like I said, but I'm going to tell you about the moment this movie goes off the fucking rails, right? So here it goes, okay? The Mogwai, other than Gizmo, obviously, have eaten after midnight and are ready to become Gremlins. And we cut to the Microwave with Marge show, okay? Now, Microwave with Marge may be one of my favourite characters in this movie. She's this old woman who hosts a cooking show that exclusively has microwave-based recipes, right? And she makes a tuna noodle cheese product chowder surprise. I want to make that, genuinely. I've heard there's a Gremlins cookbook, and if that isn't in there, that's a crime, okay? Because, like, that shit sounds... Nah, I'm alright, actually, thinking about it. Anyway, so she's on the TV making this show. She opens her pot, and Daffy jumps out and starts squirting sauce at her. And then she gives the most soulful scream I've heard in a movie. Then she gets attacked by George. Then the Gremlins blow up a microwave, which causes the sprinklers to go off, and then they start multiplying, and that's how the plot of this movie begins. That's where you get your new Gremlins. The Gremlins in this movie originate from the Microwave with Marge show. Great, I think. Just fantastic storytelling. Now, there's something about this scene that I want to talk about specifically, because I haven't actually seen anyone talk about it on the internet, but I think it's hysterical, because it genuinely, for as much as this movie's silly, a lot of it, if you follow the rules of the story world, make a decent amount of sense. There is a moment in this film that makes no sense, okay? Daffy jumps out the pot, right? And then the sprinklers go off, it gets him wet, and he multiplies. How did the sauce in the pot not count as him getting wet? I don't get that. Okay? Like, and again, I'm not here to criticize, because frankly, I think Gremlins 2 is an uncriticizable movie. The moment you criticize this film, you are the idiot. You just don't get it. It's as simple as that, right? You can't consciously bully this movie because it makes you look like an idiot. This isn't a film to be criticized. This is a film to stare at in awe as you just find yourself fascinated with what's happening. Okay, but enough about plot inconsistencies, right? You remember I was talking about the science lab earlier. This comes back and is very important. So now you've got Gremlins running amok, okay? And you've got Daffy, Lenny, George, Mohawk, all now turned into these sickening Gremlins, right? But then obviously, you know, in the first film, you had a significant amount of Gremlins running around Billy's hometown, okay? So they needed more Gremlins. So, you know, they multiplied. You've now got several generic Gremlins running around. But they made a batshit fucking Like, I don't know what compelled them to do this. I don't know what Joe was on the morning that he decided this was a good idea. They wanted more unique gremlins, and they used this science lab as an excuse to do that. And that's where the Key and Peele sketch comes in and why it's so hysterical, because they did not tell a single fucking lie. You genuinely have an electricity gremlin who is fully CGI animated. You have the brain gremlin who talks with this weird pseudo-British accent, sings New York, New York at one point in the film, crashes the stock market, has an exclusive interview where he talks about... I'm just going to play you this part of the film.
Civilization, yes. The Geneva Convention, chamber music, Susan Sontag. Everything your society has worked so hard to accomplish over the centuries, that's what we aspire to. We want to be civilized. I mean, you take a look at this fellow here.
That's his interpretation of society. And I think that's fascinating. You do have a... I hope I'm using a politically correct term here. You have a cross-dressing gremlin who has giant tits and dresses like a prostitute, which, you know, I don't know, I don't really want to know which of the writers' disguised fetish that is, but I fuck with it. Go for it, honestly. Bat Gremlin is real. There is a gremlin with wings who flies out of the fucking wall and carves a perfect Batman symbol into the wall. Spider Gremlin, there is a spider with 8 legs. That's what Mohawk turns into later in the movie. He becomes this spider gremlin who traps people in webs. Again, Key and Peele sketch didn't lie once. All of these things are real in the movie. Vegetable gremlin, there's a gremlin made out of veg, and its entire thing is just that it is vegetables. I'm honest, I'm struggling to make this video because I'm actually just trying to process this stuff in my own head as I'm talking about it, because this is fucking ridiculous. Right, so enough about the Gremlins, okay? Yes, you have all these wacky, zany, Looney Tunes-esque characters running around, okay? And everyone's getting terrorized. But the people that get terrorized in this film are hysterical. Oh, and like I mentioned him briefly earlier, that I want to really hone in on this character of Daniel Clamp. Okay, so Daniel Clamp originally was meant to be one of the lead villains of this movie. But they cast John Glover as the character to play this Trumpian, you know, very, like, pompous but charming guy. And he nails the mannerisms of the real Donald Trump. He walks around with this boastful nature. He has this very tight face with extreme expressions. And yet, he went so far with the charmingness that they couldn't in good conscience make this dude a villain and had to rewrite the movie for him to end up being a hero. Daniel Clamp, ultimately, this billionaire, saves the day come the end of the movie. He's this just ridiculous out there character, and yet I fucking love him. I absolutely adore Daniel Clamp, bro. I think he may be my favourite main character of this movie. Genuinely fascinating character, I love him. So yeah, you know, a lot ends up happening. Like, you have got some really dumb moments in this film. I'll just list off a few real quick. There's a moment where the Gremlins break, and this is the most meta thing I've ever seen in a movie. I'm not exaggerating. The Gremlins break the literal film reel that we are watching the movie on, and then we find ourselves in the canon of this movie is broken in this moment. We find ourselves in a movie theatre that is watching Gremlins 2. So it is implied that none of this really happened and that the entire Gremlins world isn't even real within its own movies, which is, like, what? So someone complains that the film reel's been broken to the movie clerk. He walks in and he gets Hulk Hogan to threaten to beat up the Gremlins and put the movie back on. There is a in-person Hulk Hogan cameo in this movie, and he threatens to fucking beat the shit out of the Gremlins, and they are genuinely terrified of Hulk Hogan and put the movie back on.
Gremlins in this theater now? Okay, you guys, listen up. People paid good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
fucking bravo. Like, I think that's genius. There's a bit where Daniel Clamp has a secret exit out of his building and arises out of a tree in the city centre. Fantastic. But like I mentioned, there is a scene where Brain Gremlin sings New York, New York, and all the gremlins like join in, including a scene where one gremlin gets the Warner Brothers logo tattooed on his stomach, which again is just a fascinating bit of fourth wall breaking.
Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today.
Daniel Clamp has an end of the world message video ready to be sent out, and he genuinely thinks it's beautiful, and yet it's the worst thing ever. And I love that moment because it's actually based on a real thing. There is an American news station that has an end of the world broadcast recorded, and it apparently, like, I've seen it as well, it really is as like self-dick sucking as Daniel Clamp's video is. Like, again, the amount of things that are real that this movie references is genuinely incredible. So, you know, this is dumb, right? This is all incredibly stupid. But the way that the gremlins are defeated at the end of the movie is, remember the electricity gremlin? At one point in the movie, they trap him in the holding part of a mobile, like a telephone. And at the end of the film, they purposefully get all of the gremlins wet while Brain is singing New York, New York, and somehow shoot the electricity gremlin out of the phone and murk all of the gremlins.
Hit it!
And that's it. They're dead. That's the end of the movie. Except it isn't the end of the movie. Because again, like I mentioned at the start, all these characters, you know, Billy, Kate, Daniel Clamp, Mr. Futterman, they are all existing characters. They all have character arcs, and by the end of this film, they all get happy endings, and it feels very natural and deserved. You know, for as dumb as this movie is, it delivers on what it sets out to do with all the characters. But the way that this movie ends is one of my favourite endings to a film ever, right? So there's this one character, Frank Forster, who's one of Daniel Clamp's employees, and he's spent this entire movie getting terrorised by Greta, the female gremlin, right? Like, she's making unwanted advances on this guy. And he gets trapped in the building. Reminder that this is the end of the movie. All the gremlins are dead, right? This dude is trapped in the building, gets stuck, calls Daniel Clamp. He says he's going to send someone up to him. And then the lights go down. A wedding anthem starts to play. Greta Gremlin, alive, in a wedding dress, wanting to smooch the guy, right? And he looks petrified. The movie ends with this motherfucking guy. He goes, so the implication and the takeaway of this movie is that a guy, at the very least, kisses and marries a gremlin. That's the least that could happen. My interpretation of this is that this dude did fuck the gremlin. He fucked her. They fucking... like, we're talking like full-blown... And I just think that moment summarizes why this movie is brilliant. Because this movie loves you so much and hates you at the same time. And it hates itself. And I think that is what is brilliant about it, is that there isn't a thing in this movie that takes itself even remotely seriously. Like, yes, all of the characters have arcs, but the film takes the mess out of these character arcs significantly and points out the flaws. You know, the movie points out its own flaws to such a degree that, like I mentioned earlier, it's not possible to criticize this film. It just isn't. You know, people at the time hated this movie because they wanted a sequel to Gremlins and got whatever this smorgasbord of crack cocaine-filled Joe Dante ideas they got. But looking at this movie now, it really has aged like a fine wine. It really has. It's gotten better with time, because this movie, and the reason I love it, and what I've been getting at this whole time, is that this movie is balls on a filmmaker. It is taking the expectations of Hollywood sequels and franchising and giving it the biggest fuck you imaginable. Like, this movie, in theory, if you look at its characters, could be made to sell toys. All of these Gremlins, very marketable. But it hates itself to such a degree that it is impossible to market these characters. Warner Brothers could not go out there and seriously market Brain Gremlin or Greta Gremlin. They couldn't. Because they just... it would be embarrassing. And I think that's what I love so much, right? I try and make my own films. I would never call myself a filmmaker at all, but I try and make my own films every now and then, and I sort of have an understanding of the process. And I have a massive understanding of, you know, these franchising concepts that companies try and push now. These big conglomerates want everything to have like a universe. And this was very much even a thing back then in, you know, 1990 when this film came out. But Joe didn't want it. And I fully believe that Gremlins 2 murdered the possibility of a Gremlins franchise. And I say thank God. I say thank God we got this movie, because I thoroughly do not believe we will ever get a movie like Gremlins 2 again. We may get films that intend to be what Gremlins 2 was, and get commissioned to be what Gremlins 2 was. But I think Warner Brothers learned a big lesson from the making of this movie, in that if someone doesn't want to make something and you force them to do it, don't act surprised when they make the entire movie the biggest fuck you to you imaginable. That's about as much as I want to say about Gremlins 2. Honestly, I can only say so much, but I can just implore you to please check out this movie. You will not understand the chaos of Microwave with Marge, Daniel Clamp, the Gremlin chaos that happens in this movie unless you watch it yourself. So wherever it's available for streaming, or if you can pick it up on Blu-ray or whatever, or just watch it. Please watch this movie. It's the best thing you can ever do. And yes, if you're wondering, I would happily fuck Greta Gremlin.